Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and today Apple released iOS 14.6 RC, or release candidate to developers and public beta testers. Usually by the time this video is out, the release candidate is out to public beta testers as well, and this came in at a very large 4.58 gigabytes on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, and it was 3.9 to over 4 gigabytes on all the devices in this video. So anytime you're going from a beta to a release candidate or final version, it's a pretty large install. Now, along with iOS 14.6 RC that I'm running on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, I'm also running that on the iPhone 11 and iPhone 7. And then Apple also released iPadOS 14.6 RC that's on my 12.9-inch iPad Pro. They also released watchOS 7.5 RC, tvOS 14.6 RC, and macOS 11.4 RC. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the build number. We'll go to Settings, then General, then About. As you can see, the build number is 18F71. And this particular build is the final version that should release to the public unless Apple finds an additional issue where they need to release a second release candidate. Generally, they don't do that, so this should be the final version released to the public. And in this version, there's a new modem update. So if you were having connectivity issues or switching between 4G and 5G, hopefully that's resolved for you. We'll have to see what it's like in a couple days, but there is a new modem update for these devices and most devices as well. Now, as far as new features in this update, well, the first thing has to do with actually updating the phone. And the odd thing is it's so far something you can't see. In the first version of iOS 14.6 betas, there was a little tab at the bottom if you were on a previous version that would allow you to update to the next version without removing the beta profile. Apple is saying you can now directly update your iOS or iPadOS device to the latest release candidate without removing the profile. Now, we've been able to do this in the past most of the time, but sometimes you're not able to, and then after updating to the release candidate, you can choose to update to the next available beta or uninstall the profile to remove your device from the beta. We've kind of done this all along, so maybe there'll be a new option when the public version comes out, but right now there's no change as far as that goes, so maybe it's something we'll see, but right now they're just saying that in the notes that that's new. Now, the first visible thing or major change that Apple's made today is with Apple Music. And Apple Music is going to get lossless music or high-quality music, which will be available in Apple Music in the beginning of June. As you can see here in Music, it says Apple Digital Master on this song. However, eventually you'll see this say lossless if there's a lossless audio track available. That's a higher quality version of audio, and it's being offered at no additional cost. However, in order to use that, you'll need an external encoder, such as a DAC, maybe an amp to go along with that. That's a digital to analog encoder with maybe a high quality pair of headphones. Unfortunately, the lossless audio will not be available on things like AirPods Pro or AirPods Max, according to Apple. So that's a bit of a disappointment. We were hoping for maybe a better Bluetooth standard that would allow better quality audio. Maybe we'll see something in the future. However, along with that comes new spatial audio and Dolby Atmos that work even on the first generation AirPods for music. So that's coming to this, and we'll see that soon in the beginning of June, according to Apple, but you'll need 14.6 to use that. Now, along with that, they've added some new settings. So if we go into Settings and we scroll down to Music, at the top it says Allow Music to Access Cellular Data, so that's new. They've changed the way this is arranged a little bit, and under cellular streaming, you have high quality. Eventually, you'll have lossless as well. It's just not showing up yet since it's not available. And then also, as you go down, you'll see it says download over cellular. If we compare that with iOS 14.5.1, it's a little bit different. They've changed the arrangement of it a little bit. You'll see here there's no download over cellular. There are similar options, but they've just rearranged it a little bit and then given you more options for high quality audio. So that's something they've changed in this update, and I can't wait for that to be available. They've made this at no additional cost. You'll have all those features, and with other music services, you're going to see some changes with maybe services like Spotify offering lossless maybe to compete, and even Amazon Music is now offering lossless for free. They used to charge extra for that. So it's already starting to make a change across the industry. Now, the next thing has to do with Apple Card. Maybe you have an Apple Card, and here's my Apple Card. It's a bit weathered, and discolored from being in a wallet, but this Apple Card is tied to my iPhone so I can make payments with it. And now there's an option for Apple Card Family. Now, I'm not actually seeing the physical options yet, but they are in 14.6 according to Apple, where you can share this with up to 5 people, including anyone 13 years or older in a family sharing group. When you share your Apple Card, you can track expenses and manage spending across different people and build credit together. So maybe you're not able to get a credit card, you could share that with a family member and then build credit to maybe get one for yourself. So that's something that that's being added to Apple Wallet, and we should see very soon. So that's nice to see. Now, Apple has been talking about new podcast subscriptions since the last Apple event. If we go into podcasts, there's some changes here. So the first thing is, if you're under library, the word downloaded is now there instead of downloads. So that's a slight change, not a huge change, but something to note. And then also maybe we go into our library and tap on something we're following or subscribed to. You'll see in the upper right, there's some icon changes. On the right is iOS 14.6. On the left is 14.5.1. The download icon is slightly different. If we tap the 3 dots in the upper right, you'll see that we have the option to remove downloads and also mark as all as played. So that's something a little bit new as well. They've just made some refinements there. So we're not seeing subscriptions yet, but there is an option under your account. So if you go into Listen Now, tap your icon in the upper right, it says Manage Subscriptions, and then there's a credit amount above that. So when there are subscriptions, you'll actually have a credit for that and maybe be able to subscribe to your favorite podcasts. Now, I am not seeing anything under Browse for subscription podcasts, but that may allow people to maybe have podcasts without advertisements within their podcasts, and then they could benefit from you listening to it. We'll have to see how that works in the future. So far, I'm not seeing anything to subscribe to, but we should have that fairly soon. So they're making refinements throughout podcasts as well as Apple Music and making things more consistent with the word downloaded, for example. So that's new as well. Now, something that Apple keeps updating that's pretty great is accessibility. If we go into settings and then go to accessibility and then we go to voice control, under voice control, if this is turned on, you can now restart your phone and then unlock your phone with voice control without having to touch the phone. So let's go ahead and reboot the phone and I'll show you how this works. So let me turn it off here. Now we've booted up the iPhone 11, we have voice control turned on, and maybe we want to try and use the iPhone and there's no way to touch it. Well, in order to use this, we can use our voice. So let me show you how that works. Go home. Now we're presented with the passcode. We need to enter that. Tap 1. Tap 2. Tap 3. Tap 4. And you'll see now we're home. So now we can go to our home screen using just our voice. If we've booted up our phone or needed to restart it for an update, for example, we can just use voice control for that, which I think is a huge step forward for those that aren't able to touch the phone, for example. So that's great to see them update that, and it seems to work really well. So they continue to improve that. Now, the next thing they've updated has to do with Find My and AirTags. So let's go to Find My. So here we are. Now I'm within Find My, and if I go to rename item, you'll see it just says Office. And if we go into custom name, it will open up the emoji picker. Now, the first time you set up an AirTag on iOS 14.6, you'll have the option to select an emoji now. That wasn't there before with iOS 14.5.1. You could set it afterward, but not before. So that's something that's new. Now, if we go into the Find My app again and tap on Enable Lost Mode, under Enable Lost Mode, we now have the option to use an email address. So before we could use our phone number, we can also now use an email address. That's new as well. So they've updated that. Also, if you have an AirTag, maybe it's lost, and someone with an Android phone taps on it to identify it using NFC, it will now hide part of the phone number. So if we tap this on the back of, say, the Pixel 5, for example, we'll give it just a moment, it finds it, gives us the serial number, and then obscures most of the phone number. And just for this video, it's blurred out, but that gives you an idea of what it looks like. So it's just something they've updated in this particular update. Now, along with today's announcement of the Apple Lossless service, Apple also announced 2 new Pride watch bands. So you have this watch band along with a Nike watch band. And if we go into the Watch app, you can actually see those new watch faces there. So you have the Pride Woven and Pride Woven that's sort of a spiral. So these two new watch bands are actually in iOS 14.6. So you can see them here if you want to look at them. And then if you have watchOS 7.5, you'll be able to use them as well. So those have been added to iOS 14.6. Now, the first time you open the TV app, you'll have a splash screen. And it says Apple Originals, watch exclusive shows and movies, new originals every month, and then Apple TV channels. Pay for just the channels you want, share with up to 6 members or 6 family members. So that's new in this update. There's also a splash screen that we saw before in the App Store and with podcasts. I did not see it on the release candidate though. So you may see that, you may not. Now, also in the code, there's some updated images for all new Beats Studio Buds. So that's within the code. The images are there. They're just not out yet. So that's within this code. Now, Apple has also fixed some issues within iOS 14.6. And the first thing is when you unlock with the Apple Watch, it may not work after using Lock iPhone on Apple Watch. So maybe you put your Apple Watch on, you unlock your phone, it unlocks your Apple Watch. There were some bugs there. They've now resolved that. Also, if you're using the Reminders app, they've fixed an issue where sometimes reminders may appear as blank lines. So instead of showing you your actual reminder, they would be blank. Now it will show properly. Also, if you're using call blocking, maybe in your phone settings, you're using call blocking, the call blocking extension sometimes would not appear in settings. It should now show up properly. Now, the next one I think is a pretty big one. If you were having issues with Bluetooth, for example, Apple has fixed it where Bluetooth devices could sometimes disconnect or send audio to different devices on an active call. So those disconnects and problems you were having with Bluetooth should now be resolved. And even with iOS 14.6 Beta 3, Bluetooth seemed to be much better. So it looks like they're actively working on it, and it should be much better in this update. Now, Apple has also fixed an issue where there might have been reduced performance during startup. I heard a little bit about this from those on older phones, such as the iPhone 6s Plus, the iPhone 7, and so that performance issue should be resolved in this update. Now, what Apple has not mentioned whatsoever is anything to do with green tint. So if you're having green tint on the iPhone 12 series phones, they haven't mentioned it as far as low brightness or anything like that. However, many people that are using this have said that it's been resolved. So on Beta 3, hopefully it's resolved with this, but so far I haven't heard anyone saying that green tint is back, but Apple has not addressed it specifically. However, they fixed that issue with the iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max last year on that phone in August, so they still could be working on it if it's a problem for you. Also, if you have the new app tracking transparency feature, maybe you're using that and you go to privacy and tracking and it's grayed out for you, well, this has not been addressed as well. However, many on 14.6 betas say that it's actually activated now, so you can turn it on. However, if it's off, it's just denying anything to track. So if it's turned off, it's not actually off, it's just not showing you a pop-up for that, and it's disabled. So that's actually a good thing. However, it may be grayed out for you based on certain criteria still. Now, Apple has also said there's security updates. What those are specifically, we'll probably have to wait until the final version is actually released to the public. And so we're sort of waiting for that to see what it will be in it and what they have, but Apple has not specified yet. They normally release those notes a little bit later on. As far as overall performance, though, performance seems to be pretty good for most people. So maybe you're on the iPhone 7, for example, it seems to be performing pretty smoothly after everything loads. It's not super fast, but it doesn't feel as slow as it was on 14.5.1, for example. So you'll see scrolling seems okay, whether that be in music, going back to settings, and just scrolling. It just seems to be much better than it was before. So that performance issue definitely seems to have addressed something. Now, with iPadOS 14.6 release candidate, there's nothing other than what I've already mentioned new on the iPad. So Apple has not made any iPad-specific updates. I think we're going to see some major changes with iOS 15 on June 7th at WWDC. But so far, nothing is different. Just the splash screen when you go into the TV app, for example, the same sorts of changes will be there as well. So nothing specifically new to the iPad. However, battery life on my iPad continues to be fairly poor, and I'm waiting, hopefully with this update, to see if it's much better. I'm still only getting about 5 hours of screen on time on the iPad with any of the recent versions of iPadOS. The battery health on this device, though, is quite good. It's well over 95%. So Hopefully it will improve with this update, but it will take a few days to know. The same is true with iOS 14.6 release candidate. It will take a few days to know exactly what battery life is like. And if we take a look at battery health, I'm at 100%, and this is charged every single night on a MagSafe fast charger or dock. And let's take a look at the last 10 days. Now, this varies greatly depending on the day. This was my best day at 2 hours and 8 minutes of screen on time, 20 minutes of screen off time when I was running beta 3. If we multiply that times 4, maybe since we're using 25% of the battery, if I was to continue to use it to 100%, 2 hours and 8 minutes would be about 8.5 hours or so, 8 hours and 20 minutes or so. So that's pretty good usage overall. It varies greatly depending on the day. For example, yesterday was 1 hour and 58 minutes with 3 hours and 23 minutes of screen off time. The prior day had 8 hours and 58 minutes of screen off time playing music. Most people are saying that it's getting 8 to 10, maybe 12 hours of screen on time depending on the device you're using, and I'm getting about 50% by the end of the day remaining. So it's actually doing quite well for me. Now, as far as if you should install iOS 14.6 RC, well, if you're having problems with iOS 14.5.1, for example, and you're familiar with the beta program, I definitely could recommend trying this out since it's a release candidate. Unless there's some small or major bug found with it, Apple will release this exact same version to the public in a few days. And as far as when to expect iOS 14.6, well, it could be released as soon as the end of this week. Apple's releasing some new devices at the end of this week, so it could come out by Friday the 21st, or maybe in a couple days, or it's possible they could wait another week or so. It just depends on what Apple decides to do. But based on what I've said before with new devices coming out on Friday, it seems likely that it would be out in a few days, but we'll have to wait and see. There's no specific date that Apple has given just yet, but that audio with Apple Lossless comes out in the beginning of June, so you will need 14.6 by then. But usually they'll come out with the final version after the release candidate within a few days or a week at the most. Now, as far as Geekbench scores, for those of you that want to see that, let's go ahead and take a look at those. So we'll go over to Geekbench 5, and on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, I scored 1,593 for single core, 4,178 for multi-core. That's pretty good considering I ran it right after updating, and if we take a look at the prior update, it actually was a little bit lower than that, but like I said, I ran it right after installing it. So it's still over 4,000, which is quite good. If we take a look at the other devices, let me line those up here so you can take a look at them. And from left to right, I have the iPad Pro 12.9 from 2020, followed by the iPhone 7, then the iPhone 11, and the iPhone 12 Pro Max. This should give you a general idea of what to expect right after installing it. These can improve a little bit after that, though. So that's it for iOS 14.6 release candidate. This came out pretty quickly and may be out as soon as the end of this week. We don't know. Apple hasn't given us a final date, like I said, but we should see it fairly soon, usually when they release a release candidate. At the longest, usually a week. But since Apple's releasing new products at the end of this week, we may see it before then. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.